Hello, welcome to Quackalope, and today we are taking on a monumental task. We are covering this giant black box Kingdom Death monster. Yeah, this is a video I have wanted to create since the formation of this channel and before. There's a lot of videos in this universe that I still want to make, and we thought with this new format, this right for you, wrong for you format, we'd actually be able to give it an honest swing.
Yeah.
And just in case you don't say what I want you to, I've got a founding stone to throw just to veto any point that Jan makes.
Okay, so critical. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. For those of you that are just tuning in, whether you are friends of the channel already, part of the paddle, or you're coming in from Kingdom Death itself, I am one of you. Thank you for being here. I am a diehard fan of Kingdom Death. Jan, a little bit more mixed on it, and actually sold or traded his copy away.
Oh, you don't have to say that publicly.
I just have to throw that out there.
Oh,
We're
come
going to
on.
have as close to a biased review as we can.
Unbiased.
Oh, sorry. My bad on the phraseology there. This really is a gem of a game. In this type of video, in this right for you, wrong for you video, we go through a few categories that we genuinely look at when deciding if we're going to add a game to our gaming library. Mm-hmm. These are things that help us maybe structure and have a discussion about who this game might be right for and who it might be wrong for, because there's a whole lot of people this game is wrong for.
Oh, yes.
But the people that it's right for,
it's so right.
it's the top of the line.
Yeah, it's like the best game that a person that knows that this is...
Yes.
Okay, but let's not get into it. I don't want to
Sure.
throw too much out there.
Those points that we're going to cover are going to be the overview of the game as a whole, the theme, accessibility, gameplay, modes of play, the innovation itself, and then finally the price point. The big kind of bottom line, once you've checked off all the boxes, is it enough for you to justify?
Ooh, especially this one.
So let's start. I'll let you try to set this game
Oh,
up.
come on. That's such a big responsibility. You're like the guy.
Yeah, I know. What is this game? What is Kingdom Death Monster?
Kingdom Death Monster is one of the most ambitious titles that I've ever come across. Let's start it off with that. In this game, you are a group of survivors. You have awoken in a really strange and eerie place, and you feel danger lurking at every corner. As you start basically waking up for the first time, you are immediately attacked by a savage beast. That beast then becomes your mortal nemesis, and it is your job.
I mean,
What?
close.
What?
We're getting there.
no, what'd I do wrong?
You got to, so you're attacked and mauled by a creature, and in the various
Yeah.
storylines that could be various starting monsters that set up the prologue. In the base game, that's going to be the White Lion. You, in your blind, ink-stained eyes, grasp for the ground and find that it is covered in a pattern of stone faces. You find a crack, you break one free, and you go to battle. After that showdown, that hunt, you come to a blooming light in the distance, a place called the Lantern Horde, a place where you feel calm and restful and safe for once in your kind of short existence. You set up camp there. You start developing a tribe, a civilization, creating new life, and learning that you must venture out in order to survive. Mm-hmm. And you do. So you build a settlement, use the resources that you strip from creatures like the White Lion or the Screaming Antelope, bring those back to camp to craft new weapons, new armor, upgrade your gear grids, and then venture back out into the darkness. The overwhelming darkness where any random thing could happen. You have this entire book that guides your journey along with an entire stack of cards giving you lore and flavor and AI decks and creatures that feel rich and thematic. The overview of this game is that it is a story-driven and, for me, theme-driven game that sets you in a dark, boutique, nightmare horror fantasy world where you're doing everything you can to survive.
Yeah, and one of the greatest things about it is that it's all about a really interesting take on combat. You know, mostly the entire game is going to comprise of boss fights. And through those boss fights, you're going to try and survive, and from them, you're going to gain resources in order to build up your own particular colony of people?
The game is split into 3 main stages. You start off with a showdown phase, which this is going to be your Monster Hunter style, flip the AI card, struggle to survive, hopefully be as tactical and skilled as you can be in order to defeat the creature. Each one feels rich and thematic. Each one has an AI deck that sets up a fight that feels real to the beast that you're fighting. For instance, the white lion will try to grab, isolate, and then maul to death one of your little survivors. The antelope will kick from behind and then continue running and sprinting, trying to trample down its prey, always trying to escape everyone that's kind of fighting it and scaring it.
They are all incredibly unique.
So that's the showdown. When those creatures die, you harvest resources from them. You bring them back to the settlement where you can unlock different locations. You have the Skinnery, the Organ Grinder, the Catarium, the Lantern Horde, which is the place where you start, and you can develop and grow these areas with new technology, new resources, new innovations, so that not only the skill set of your tribe can increase, but the weapons, the items that you're using on your player board also get better as it goes on. And then the third stage of the game is going to be the hunt. That's where you actually leave your settlement and you go on a little bit more of a narrative journey.
Yeah.
This is where the flavor text of the game really comes alive. Every creature has their own unique hunt events. You also have a chart of 100 different potential events that you roll while you're taking steps into the darkness. Those result in incredible, horrible, beautiful, tragedy, the whole mix. One important note before we move on to our more focused points. This is not a hero-driven game. This is a settlement survival game. If you have 30 people in your population and you have 3 favorites in your population, your 3 favorites are going to die in the most stupid way possible, and you're going to be taking out new survivors almost every time. This is about surviving as a whole, and one of the things that throws people off when they first start diving into this game is getting attached to someone named Zachary and building Zachary up over the course of some epic battles, and then having him realize that the earth is flipped and instead of faces on the ground, it's feet, and he's insane, and so he clings to the ground and doesn't let go until he dies. That can happen.
That is literally a thing in the book.
So, this is a settlement survival game. If this overview, the 3 main stages, the way I've excitedly talked about what this game is, has intrigued you at all, if you're here watching this video, then it might be right for you.
Yeah.
It's worth staying tuned to find out. The next thing we want to touch on is going to be the theme.
Yeah.
We already talked about this a little bit, but let's go ahead and throw out the thing that will make this wrong for people. Like, let's give you an out yesterday.
Yeah. So there's a lot of blood, there's a lot of gore, and there's a lot of sexual motifs in this one.
Now, nothing directly sexual, but bodies and people that are exposed.
Body parts.
Both men and women that are in loincloths and exposed like a tribe of settlement people would be. And in the same anime manga style of art, the designers of this game are giant, Japanese RPG fans. And so it's inspired from things like Berserk, which are dark nightmare horror paired with sensuality. If you're turned off by that, that's perfectly fine. That's 100% acceptable, and this game just won't be right for you.
Yeah, there are monsters here that are made with, body parts that I don't think I can mention here on YouTube.
But you can say there are penises and breasts and...
Yes, those things. They're all around.
Mixed throughout this game.
Yeah, there's a monster that's just made out of phalluses, right?
Yes.
Just exclusively.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a unique one for sure. Body horror galore.
And the creator's response when it comes to, the sexualization of both men and women has been just that. It's inspired from source material that does that, and it does it across the board with no qualms and no apologies. So there are expansion content that includes pinup females. There are expansion content that includes some of the most sensual pinup males I've ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah, those are intense.
When we dive into the lore, let's go ahead and talk about, because that is depicted, that lore is depicted through the artwork, the graphics, the models themselves. But what is this world we're in?
It's a complete mystery. People,
in a lot of ways.
Yeah, one of the things that really bring in new players is just how deep this tale can go. There is an entire book, there's an entire Wikipedia, there's an entire web universe dedicated to trying to understand the world that Mr. Adam Poots has brought to life. Here, and again, I am not the most qualified to talk about this, but essentially there is a sickness, there is a plague going through this world, a darkness that is consuming everything, and it is transforming what used to be normal creatures into something terrifying.
It's sort of a corruption or an essence of a virus, yeah.
And that virus is taking over everything and creating these sort of colonies and kingdoms that essentially start kind of like facing each other to a certain point.
Well, you're sort of spawned in the middle of this rise and fall, and depending on which scenario or storyline you're playing through, you'll experience them in different ways. But there are deities and beings and bosses that take advantage of these human populations. And the humans are monsters in their own right. Everything, as Adam has stated, is a monster in this world. And so we are the weakest tribe of people. And from what we can see, most of the bosses, most of the big bad guys need or harvest or grow us for various reasons, whether they're trying to get our knowledge, trying to come back through and just kind of scoop us up for a nice souffle. We are the bottom of the totem pole. And you're thrust into this world. The first images you get are flashes of blood and gore and darkness, and this is what you have to survive. And people are drawn in by that.
Yeah, because it's a mystery. You're trying to discover exactly why and how this is all happening. And even when you get through the entirety of the game,
the answers aren't entirely there. One of the coolest things about this game is that the world and lore is ever expanding. There's answers that are really only inside the mind of Adam Poots. And so we as fans get to journey along on this ride, and there's so much potential content to explore, so many people writing articles, talking, discussing, a community around this game, that if you want to dive into the lore, there's enough room for you to go as far down as you want and continue going down. And that's one of the reasons that I'm in love with this game. That mystery, that knowledge, that writing, that inspired take on storytelling. This is the first game I ever ran into it through. And while other games have maybe done a better job at the book writing, you know, Madara wrote an entire novel, no game has immersed me in a world through the lore, imagery, and gameplay as thoroughly as Kingdom Death has.
It's fascinating, really. As you know, I'm not necessarily the biggest story guy, but when I saw the artwork for this and when I learned about the world, I was immediately captivated, enamored, right? Because it really feels almost like an epic tale, like an RPG, without like, if none of this existed, not the pieces or the dice or the cards or all the things that Kingdom Death is famous for, I still think this would be a highly successful story-driven game in some capacity, because it is truly mesmerizing what it can bring to your table and how it can enrapture everybody that's trying to actually listen in.
So if that lore, if that world, if some of the graphic imagery and the things that this game doesn't shy away from don't throw you off,
this might be super right for you.
100%. The next thing we want to touch on is going to be a discussion around the accessibility of this game. Now, we don't need to touch on some of the things we'll get to deeper, which would be kind of things like the price point and stuff. But let's just talk about getting into this game to start with. The first thing I want to acknowledge is these finished miniatures aren't what you actually get in the core box.
Not even close.
Now, all you really need to start running are going to be 4 or 5 models, but all of these will come on sprues.
Yep.
I'll show some B-roll footage of that here, but those sprues are going to require you to cut, snip, use crafting material to put together, and then if you want them to look like this, end up eventually painting and stylizing in your own way.
So what you're implying is that this is a hobbyist's
100%.
game, right?
Not only does it have a depth and complexity when it comes to the rules and how you actually play, but the first barrier to entry is just going to be, are you willing and able to do the actual hobby side of this?
I remember the very first time that I approached Kingdom Death, and I had done a lot of thorough research into it. I had determined this was going to be the game of my life. To a certain point, I wasn't wrong, because I love Kingdom Death for what it is. But I remember the first time I started making those miniatures. Like, I used to play with Zoids and play with Legos and all these things, and all of a sudden, I get all these different, separate, and almost incomprehensible pieces thrown about.
I mean, this was probably 7 or 8 pieces originally.
But that's a basic one.
Yeah.
There comes to a point where we're even attaching small little hands into very small, like almost impossible to notice sockets, and trying to form like this beautiful creature. But it becomes, I won't say the word tedious, it's a very precise type of action. But what I wanted to get to this is, I never once ever made a mini in my life to this degree. And I had a lot of fun making them. It was a very relaxing experience. I even made the insane thing, and this is why I consider this particular part so interesting, because if you're willing to take the challenge, it's going to reward you. I even took the decision to make all of the hands in each of my figures magnetic so that I could switch out weapons, which is something you can do if you put in the work.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Every item, every gear card, every piece of this game is represented in a high quality split apart miniature on a sprue, so you can craft and make this world exactly what you want it to be. Now, this is the first game that I ever approached with miniatures as well. And so I entered the hobbyist nature of this game through that lens, and I have to be honest, it was a year until I'd built most of the core box. Even to this point, there's some models and almost all of the expansions I haven't put together yet. Now, outside of the miniature scope, what other elements of accessibility do we need to point out?
So,
this is where we're going to tell people how hard this game is to get into.
yeah, no, and it is. It really is. So the first obstacle, and yes, I'm using precise wording here. The first obstacle you're going to have to get through in order to play Kingdom Death is absorbing this book. Absorbing these rules.
I have to give a little bit of context there, though, because you're not wrong. The core rule book, first off, it isn't this wide.
Oh, no, of course
You need
not.
to read up until probably 50 pages in. But one thing this game actually does genuinely really well is a really effective starting prologue. So when you first start playing, you can get it out of the box and play through the first couple hours of the game, which is the learning intro level of the game, going page by page based off the first story here. After that, you got about 50 pages to read to get the core mechanics and be ready to run it for your group. The best way to play is with someone that knows it inside and out, and oftentimes in my gaming groups, that person has been taught by someone that first knew it inside and out, so it becomes a share with the next community type of game.
Which is actually really well placed with the theme of the game.
Sure.
But yeah, there's a lot of minutia here, right? There's, like, for example, war games in particular are famous for having all these small, intricate rules and how things interplay with each other. And to a certain point, Kingdom Death is really similar to that, right? There's a lot of really small fringe cases where things can happen that if you're not super aware of what the rule states, you're gonna spend some time looking for that. It's gonna be a little bit difficult to identify and to remember, because there's a lot to remember.
And there's two things that touch on that. There is a rule of death in here where if the rule book doesn't entirely specify, or if you want to fudge it a little bit, your gaming group's having a really hard time figuring it out, you just kind of do whatever's hardest for you, or whatever is best for the big bad guy, because you're the weakest creature in the world. And then also I have to acknowledge there's a point mid to end game for me where I haven't been there in game enough. I know the first 10 lantern years like the back of my hand. Like, I can run those solid. That's about 40 hours into the game, or 30 hours into the game. But when I get to hour 50, 60 that I've only been 2 or 3 times over the last few years, there's a point where I don't know what to do. I don't know the steps to take. I just don't know the gear cards. I don't know how things combine. And so the learning not only doesn't stop at the beginning, it continues throughout the life cycle of this game, which makes it really, really good to continue playing, but might definitely make this wrong for a wide variety of people.
And another thing that we definitely have to touch on, which I feel this game is, infamous for, is the difficulty.
Yeah.
This is one of the most difficult experiences as a board gamer or as an enthusiast you will ever face.
Yep.
And we're not talking about learning the rules. We're not talking about putting up the pieces. Those are all difficult in itself.
The gameplay itself is punishing and unforgiving in a really, really charming and beautiful way until you realize that your 35, two meetings every month campaign, 35-hour campaign, just ground to a halt because you ran out of male survivors. And all you have are 4 or 5 females, and you can't make babies anymore.
Which are, again, all mechanics in the actual game.
It's a thing that's happened.
So, it's a huge barrier to entry here, guys. I think you've touched on a lot of things. Make note that Jesse has used years, hours, campaigns, all in plural, because this is something you jump into head first.
Yeah.
It is not something that you're going to, oh, that looks neat, I'm going to take it home. No. This is something you research and you understand.
I don't like saying this because I love this game, but with a game this size, this is one that replaces either your core gaming group every other week meeting or your RPG group.
Yeah.
It's one of the two, and you got to give it a good solid 6 months. If you're ready to do that, amazing.
Yeah, no, it'll be a life-changing thing for you.
Now, the last thing I want to touch on in accessibility, and then we can move on to gameplay, is the player counts. This plays a solid 1 to 4. There's functioning where you can get it higher. I really prefer it at 1, 2, or 3. There's a really solid campaign here at 1 player where you're controlling all 4 survivors. If you're playing at 1 player, I suggest using an app. The fan-made app, specifically called The Scribe, is the one that I use. It allows you to manage all of the paperwork, all the minutia, the writing and erasing that you have to do across all the characters. At 2 to 3 players, you have a really solid collaborative experience. The reason I don't suggest it at 4 is because you will oftentimes lose a survivor in the course of a battle. At 4, you sometimes have someone sitting out of the active experience of playing the game. But it is helpful if you have someone that knows the AI deck, someone that knows the settlement, the innovations, the map. Like, if the group is working together to keep the gameplay flowing, that is the best environment to play.
Yeah.
Now, you had one last thing you wanted to touch on for accessibility, and then let's get to the gameplay.
Yeah. This is a bit of a fiddly game in the sense that there's a lot of bookkeeping. If you go into Kingdom Death, understand, like we said before, this is essentially an RPG in some capacity. So you're going to have to write things down. You're going to have to catalog stuff. And happens every single play session.
Yeah, you have your character sheets with stats and armor and buffs and debuffs and keywords that trigger special events, and your gear grids that also have a bunch of keywords that you have to track. And then you have your settlement locations, your innovations, your gear that you have. The community as a whole has developed ways to manage this. Like the Scribe app that I mentioned, there's a few others out there that work really well depending on how you want to engage with them. Along with that, we have things like card holders and sleeves. We have wooden components that help get everything organized. If you want to make this game more accessible and approachable, you can.
Yeah, it's definitely come so much farther than where it used to be. Like, I got this before all those things were accessible.
So don't be scared by that, but know it's there. And know that if you get into it, reach out to the community to find ways to lessen the burden and get this to the table more, because it's worth it if you have it.
That's a big deal also, community for this game.
Oh, it's massive. Accessibility when it comes to community is we have an active Facebook, Reddit community. There's a Discord. You can find a gaming network and home just in Kingdom Death. And when I first joined the community, that's exactly what I did. This community helped me get through some pretty hard times. So, before I started the channel. So if you've listened to those accessibility issues and you're still here paying attention...
Good job, first of all.
First off, thank you. We rambled for way too long on that section. God. But second off, I think that section of the video is really going to be the major sticking points.
Yeah.
So if you're still interested, check a little box and let's get excited for what's to come.
Yeah, because you're probably going to love it.
Let's talk about the gameplay, and not all of it. What we usually do in this section, since we've done an overview on the 3 main tenets of this game already, let's talk about our favorite pieces. What stands out to you when it comes to the gameplay here?
I love I'm fascinated by how combat works here. It is thrilling, it is engaging, it is terrifying, and it's fun. It's very basic. All you'll do is you'll move through a particular, you'll move through squares across the board and you'll activate different abilities. But the way that you have to take into consideration positioning, the way you have to take into consideration the traits that the monster's going through, take even into consideration the terrain that's around you. There's a lot of depth in there, and that by itself is just a great game. Everything else that surrounds it makes it even deeper and richer and funner and greater. It's just, it's like, it's one of these things that just keeps on giving for how fun it can be.
Yeah. For me, it's the fact that when you come to the combat, every fight feels unique and developed. Like I said earlier with the antelope and the white lion, there's a way that they employ the AI system in this game that makes every character and creature a whole new obstacle and challenge, and you never quite know which version you're hunting or which one you're facing. It could be slightly harder, it could be modified in certain ways. You know how it'll act, what the species personality is, but never quite the beast you're going up against.
It's genius.
I love the complexity and the sort of gruesome hardness of this game. I like that I've struggled to get to end game, multiple times and failed multiple times. It makes me want to keep coming back. Like there's something I haven't explored. And lastly, from a hobbyist standpoint now, the models that come into this game and the models they release, every now and then as supplements or new gear or new support really are some of the nicest you'll find in this industry.
Incredible.
They can't come as full plastic models, partially because of how they combine, but also because the level of detail that you get, you just don't get if they're not on split sprues. So while it can be an issue getting into this and learning how to build them, these are going to be some of the most thematic and detailed miniatures you'll ever see.
Yeah, like what we're talking about is you can have them to showcase for everyone because they are that interesting and that beautiful.
Yeah, they're genuinely pieces of art. The other thing that I wanted to touch on when it comes to the gameplay is actually going to be developing your civilization itself. I have always loved video games that let me bring resources back and craft new things. And this game does that. It lets you be purposeful with what you want to hunt, what type of resources you need. Coming back home to finally build a bow or get that harp that you need to face this next person feels really, really, really good. And I like that. I like that there is, throughout the entirety of the game, new locations, new opportunities, new items that you're unlocking the recipe in order to craft. And not only that, but this game has a massive amount of support from the publisher itself.
Yep.
There are gear grids, new strain systems, which is like a legacy mode for the game.
There's so
you
many
have
things.
new recipes coming out, new supplements, and not only that, but core expansions and giant boxes the size of the core box itself showing up over the next few years.
It's crazy.
To give you more of what we already love.
Yeah, and one of the other things that I just find incredible about this is that it almost recreates the feedback loop I get from games from Monster Hunter. So I feel that Monster Hunter in particular is one of those particular video games that will almost be nearly impossible to recreate in board game form, but then Kingdom Death comes and just proves me wrong.
A lot of people mix this with like a Dark Souls Monster Hunter type of vibe. I mean, that's the flavor, theme, struggle, and type of gameplay it sort of exists. And I think there's a lot of video game fans that were pulled deeper into the board game hobby because this one said, hey, you want to do this on a table?
And that's actually a really big, might be wrong for you point. Because there's a lot of grinding in this game.
Sure.
And that might not be even a familiar term for a lot of board gamers out there.
I've fought this white lion 60 plus times.
So grinding essentially, and this is going to be super popular in games like Monster Hunter or maybe Diablo, is that you face the same thing over and over and over and over again to try and get a particular resource that you are really keen on in order to create something that's going to help you move forward. And Kingdom Death is synonymous with grinding. It's a part of the game, it's part of the lore, it's part of the story, and it's part of what you're going to be doing all the time. If you're the type of gamer that you're always looking for fresh, different experiences and something that you've never seen before, don't go, because Kingdom Death will give you that. But before you reach that point, you're gonna go and fight this little guy. Not little, but you're gonna fight this guy more than a few times.
Now, as the community develops and new things come out, you'll have opportunities to mix up that type of gameplay. Anyone that recognizes this will know that this is the Gigalion.
Oh, yeah.
Or the Gigalion, as I think is a preferred name in the community. And this is a one-off battle, brand new type of content for Kingdom Death, a tighter story mode campaign style that actually can go in late game or mid game and replace your classic White Lion. New mechanics, new AI system. So, tons of grinding.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But also ways to mediate and supplement that experience.
No, yeah, and it's a great experience. Like we said, combat is always thrilling and gripping, and you are going to be really focused on what's going on.
Yeah.
But just know that you're going to be doing that a lot of times. And this is, I feel, one of the parts where it won't be for a lot of people, and it comes down to how combat works. And it's going to be through these guys right here. Dice, dice, dice.
Yeah, you're going to be rolling d10s to determine a lot of the outcomes. So your strike is going to roll a d10 to see if you connect. That connection is going to roll a d10 to see if you're actually able to wound. And then sometimes that wound that you actually inflict will roll a d10 to see how critical of a hit you do. So there is elements of randomness and luck in this. And while there is dice mitigation, that's usually more mid-game to late game.
Yeah.
You can definitely control these dice to a large degree.
So so essentially what we're saying is that throughout the first 20 to 30 hours, you are subject to Lady Luck here.
Well, not entirely, but there will be moments where you roll a crit and kill a White Lion in a single blow. And then there will be moments where a White Lion rolls a crit and one of your people is just dead instantly.
But that creates such beautiful and rich moments of euphoria. You are at a moment shouting from the top of your lungs, why, Gabe? Why did you have to go? And then suddenly, you're standing on your chair screaming at a basically knocked over figure because you just cut that lion's hand off.
Yeah.
And you are just ecstatic. It's those ranges from pure dread to pure adrenaline that make the dice rolling element really incredible if you're a fan of that.
You're always a roll or a turn away from instant death, and also always a roll or a turn away from the most euphoric victory you've ever had. If you're able to lean into that story and embrace a little bit of randomness in your game, then
this actually might be right for you.
it could be so right for you.
So very right.
But if those limitations, the randomness, the paper trail,
the grinding,
the grinding elements just really don't sound that fun,
this might not be right for you.
Yeah.
And that's okay too.
that's perfectly fine. So the next thing we need to touch on is going to be the modes of play, and let's see if we can do this as a partnership.
Yeah.
We've touched on a lot of the gameplay and things that get in the way, but I want to talk on the solo-only mode, which is something you really don't run in this game. And then we can talk about the more collaborative multiplayer mode of this game.
Which I have some opinions on.
Which you have some opinions on as well. So for the solo run of this game, I think this is a really, really solid solo game. It's a puzzle that you get to constantly solve by yourself. There are a few barriers to entry. The paperwork can be daunting. Like I said, check out the Scribe or any of the other Kingdom Death apps in order to help facilitate that. I even use the Scribe when playing with multiple people just as a way to track everything that's going on.
Yeah.
The other issue with solo mode, or most of the gameplay, but solo specifically, is that it occupies your table space perpetually.
Oh yeah.
So if
All
you're
the time.
running this game solo, it can be hard to get it to the table. And then it can be hard to put it away.
Yeah.
Because you kind of just want to stick with it and play it.
Yeah, it's like one of these games that you just have a table only for this game.
Dedicated for it. So that's sort of my general take on solo mode. It's a really, really good solo-driven story. You're still controlling 4 characters. You're still focused on the settlement as a whole, and it has a depth to it that you'll almost never tap.
Yeah.
But if you fall in love with this game, just know that the core gameplay mechanics facilitate a solo story that doesn't have to end.
Yeah.
So, for solo players out there, that's my first and hot take.
For multiplayer, I have good news. It's a lot of fun. And it suddenly becomes a cooperative puzzle, right? You're trying to all together kind of like sync in order to do the right thing. However, with that being said, there are certain points that depending on your group, if you have what I call veteran Kingdom Death players, they're going to have a particular way of proceeding. And I think that's kind of intrinsic to the entirety of the game. There's a certain path that you must take in order to be successful. And if you deviate from that path, it doesn't mean that you won't get there, but you're gonna have a harder time doing so. So when you're playing with a more, seasoned
He's
individual,
talking about me here. There's certain things you do at the beginning because you know you need bandages to fight the butcher, or you always throw your stone.
You don't know.
Or you always throw your stone to chop off the white lion's hand because it gives you 1 strength buff to the character that throws it.
This is what I mean. And I think this also kind of plays into the accessibility. How do you know any of this?
By playing hundreds of hours already.
Trial and error, grinding, trying it again, losing, coming back to it. And when you do that with a group of friends, you better have some really awesome friends at your disposal, because almost no gamers like to do these things if they can choose not to do it. And that's a shame, because there's really something incredible here that a group of people can enjoy.
I don't suggest it at 4. Like I said, there's some downtime for that 4th player potentially, but I do love it at 2 and 3, especially when people know the roles they're playing. Someone can be setting up the board and getting the AI deck ready while other people are building their gear grids, getting the tabletop organized, putting cards away. There's a lot of management that goes into cycling this game, and a functioning gaming group is one where everyone has a role. Typically for us, one of those roles is this book, the lore book, the story, the setup. One of those roles is going to be the box of cards over here to the side, and one of those roles is going to be the actual game state as a whole. So, just for reference, that's the best way to build and move this game along. So, we've touched on the modes of play. We've touched on a really good multiplayer and solo experience. We've touched on a multiplayer experience that me and my gaming group kind of made a little sour.
But it's in general, like it happens to everyone. So if none of those things get in the way, and you have a group of gamers that can get this to the table,
or you want to play by yourself,
then this might
be right
for you.
Yeah. The next thing we're going to touch on, and I think this might be one of the most interesting discussions of this game between us, is going to be the innovation.
Ooh.
This is a point that we touch on every single one of our games, and oftentimes the discussion is it innovative? Does it matter? And if so, why?
Yes, and there's a lot of reasons why.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
All right.
Were you not expecting this?
I was expecting this.
Okay.
Where do you see innovation shine through in this game?
I really think everything about this game. I'm not sure if it's innovation in the right sense of like making something perfectly streamlined and beautiful. No, this is like a Frankenstein. It is imperfect, but I really adore what Poots has brought together with his team. It's incredible. I think innovation comes from the combination of mechanics. I think innovation comes from the world building. How he has weaved an entire, what could have been an RPG or maybe an epic multi-book series into a game. I think the way that the AI in this game works is fascinating, deeply fascinating.
Let's pause right there. That was one of the points that I wanted to make sure we drove home. I've talked about it with these encounters a few times now. The AI system in this game has to be one of the most innovative approaches to creature control I've ever seen, and I can't speak to if it's ever been done before. I do know that the idea or the concept of it came from the video game industry, where you have a sequence of actions that a beast or a boss can take depending on how characters exist in a game state. But mapping that from a computer program cycling and answering those questions on its own to a stack of cards that you actually build, construct, and source the personality of each one of these, is so well done and done so early in the history of what we now consider the board game universe that it had to have been on the cutting edge.
Yeah, I know.
You
It's
have moves
beautiful.
and traits and environmental factors and creatures that have series of movement controls. So
They
they'll
even react to you.
yeah, they'll identify a target, they'll track that target down, they'll move and approach. They have different attack patterns depending on where people are. You can kite them, you can guide them, you have different resources and locations you can exist on, and it none of it messes up.
It's incredible. It's fascinating, really.
And the cool thing, the way that you know this is sourced from a video game type of mindset is there are a few sequences in this game, both against and for the survivor, that do a thing you only see in video games ever, which is a glitch.
Yeah, you can game the game.
An artificial sequence of events that is built into the software itself. For instance, the Butcher, I think this might be resolved now, but there is a moment, if you get the AI deck down to the right point, where the Butcher just kicks you to death. And he'll never stop. He just starts kicking and keeps kicking and keeps kicking until every survivor is murdered. Or the White Lion, you could rip off its jaw and build that AI deck, manage it in a way where the White Lion stops attacking, sits on the ground, and cries with vomit and blood pouring out of its throat. And you lean up against it and just go insane basking in its presence, getting as much insanity, skill points, or armor kind of mental defense as you would like. Those are things you only see in video games. And because this is so well built and so deep and thorough, it has those same weird traits existing in it.
And we're not knocking it for it. Actually, it's
No,
fascinating.
it's a beautiful moment.
It's really difficult to achieve. Like, this is not something that's just going to happen by happenstance within your game.
You have to be purposeful to find it.
It's almost like, for example, when gamers are trying to find ways to break the game, they're trying to go through like passages that they shouldn't go through.
Here.
Yeah.
So that's an area of innovation that I wanted to make sure we highlighted. What other areas do you see that stand out?
Well, I think the way that the storytelling is brought through in this game is really unique, right? It's all by bits and pieces, but all the pieces kind of weave themselves together in a coherent fashion that makes so much sense when you're done with the entirety of it. I think that the way that the expansion content also brings in and kind of like combines with the game is really fascinating, and how mostly every part of the game is kind of like a plug-and-play portion of something else.
Yeah,
you can
the
substitute this with that.
expansions take out sections and stick in sections, giving you entirely new worlds and stories to experience, making different monsters and creatures interact with each other in strange ways. For instance, the Screaming Antelope, if you bring in Spediculus, which is a giant daddy long-legged spider expansion, these guys don't exist in that world anymore. They're gone. You can't play with them. The reason being is that the spiders have moved into the space and they have either been consumed or left.
See, this is what I mean. It's fascinating how all these pieces just work with each other.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And really, I can just keep going on and on about it, but I think for example, I'm not sure if, well, I wouldn't call this necessarily innovation, but it's definitely something really cool, and I don't think we've really touched enough on it. There's armor. There are weapons you can build with small pieces, and each of those pieces then become ways that you can mitigate dice rolls. Again, not necessarily innovative, but it's really nice, and it's a good way to keep players engaged throughout different sections. And that reminds me, another point of innovation, the settlement. The settlement is so cool how that works, how you're slowly but surely finding these new locations to build new things, and those new things create new technologies, and those technologies then transform your people and your settlement and the monsters you're fighting, all with just cards. And I think that is a stroke of brilliance as well.
Here's the thing I've just heard. We broke this down into 3 core gameplay sections. The hunt, the showdown, the settlement. And throughout this innovation section, we've touched on the showdown being innovative, the hunt with the storytelling being innovative, and the settlement being innovative.
So basically the entire game is innovative?
The scale, the scope, the approach that Poots and the team have taken when pulling this together, I don't know that it's the first time some of these mechanics have been done. I can't speak towards that. But I can say, in the few years I've had looking into the world of board gaming, I've never found something that is quite this.
Yeah, and that combines all of those
And the
things.
following and community that exists around this space demonstrate that it's something special, not just for me, but a lot of people are finding that they can't get quite the same experience in any other title.
It's impossible,
And
really.
this, for context, set the groundwork for where Kickstarter and the miniature-based giant titles we have today are. This is the most heavily funded board game Kickstarter ever. And I guarantee the moment Kingdom Death and Poots put out their next game, or the 2.0 version of this, once all the funding is complete, this will, again, their company will be the top of the line.
Yep.
They are the gold standard when it comes to customer service support, putting more in the box than you expect or pay for, quality of production, just overall dedication to the game they're putting on.
It's incredible. It really is.
And I love these type of games. I own a lot of big box, miniature-based, story-driven games. And there's other ones we'll cover that stand out in their own way for a variety of reasons.
But Kingdom Death is Kingdom Death.
It sets the foundation for why I fell in love with the others. So that might be a little bit of a bias, but it also might just be that they were ahead of their time.
No, yeah, I agree with you. Honestly, I think like in innovation, this is a huge check mark for anybody that's looking for that. If you want something
An experience you won't have anywhere else.
that you've never seen before.
And mechanics and gameplay that you just couldn't find another inspiration for.
It's right here.
The closest thing you could go to source it would be the actual coding and text in some of your favorite video games.
Yeah, exactly. There's no other way.
So, this is innovation.
Yeah, this is innovation. Yes, I agree.
If you want an innovative game, something that does something and gives you something you won't find anywhere else,
With a lot of work in between.
a whole lot of work in between, this might be right for you. Now, the last thing we need to look at, the big coup de grace, is going to be the price point. This game retails at, is available right now for $400.
Okay, bye everyone. Take care. Thank you so much.
No. I know, that's a big price tag,
Yeah,
right?
it
But
is.
you have to think about the hundreds of hours that I've put into the gameplay, not including the fact that I got into the miniature building hobby alongside this game, and that this is a core staple. I mean, this is in my top 5 for the rest of my life type of game. Like, I own a second core box so that when I'm 40 and it's no longer in print, I can open it and have it to play type of game. Like, I want to live in this nostalgia of this type of game. So $400 for me, it's not a big deal.
So here's something that I know a lot of people immediately go to. Confirmation bias, right? People that back a Kickstarter are obviously going to be
I don't know
keen
what you're
and
talking
partial about their games because they paid a lot of money for it.
But I
Well, let
really
me tell
like
you
this
something.
one.
Let me tell you something. I was successful in selling everything I got for Kingdom Death, and I got a lot of stuff, at exactly what I paid. And even after I sold everything, I still consider this game to actually be pretty incredible. So,
Well,
yes.
and let's point out something that we've talked about from the beginning. You moved your copy not because you didn't like the game.
Oh, and that's important, yeah.
You moved your copy because you didn't have the space for it. You couldn't table it. And then you made friends with me and some others in our community that own copies of this game and play it as much as we can.
Yep.
You know? And so for you, the decision between owning your copy and accessing someone else's became kind of a negligible factor.
Yeah, like I live in not a really large space. This is a game that requires, I would say, an entire room, honestly. Like if you really want to enjoy this, you have a room dedicated for Kingdom Death with a table in the center. Like we said, a hobbyist's game. And I just didn't have that. Like this is a game that honestly, I think way in the future, I might just consider like once I have a house, buying it and recreating everything because I loved my time with it, even though I might never play it. I just like owning it because it was amazing. But yeah, we're talking about pricing.
Yeah, we're talking about price. So let's point out some factors. 400 gets you into the core box.
Yeah.
Gets you into a game that is, if you are a miniature hobbyist, you will have enough time with that alone. Not only is there a solid game that we've already went through that's worth playing. So if you can table this is worth the price of 4 or 5 games without a second thought, in my opinion. If you know you'll get it to the table. But here's the thing. It does go on sale every Black Friday, which a little bit past now, but keep it in mind, for $3.25, shipping included. That's also not a bad deal. But the other side of that argument, the other thing I have to acknowledge, this game won't stop at being $400.
Yeah.
If you already know you love it and you're going to buy it, just be aware. There are expansions, there are miniatures, there are, I think, 24 total expansions coming down the line, 12 that are already readily available. There are miniatures and boxes and hobbyist galore kind of items. There are dice sets that you can get. Some of these aren't core. There are expansion creatures and models that allow you to do one-off battles. I would genuinely say, this might turn off some people, if you're getting into this game and you know you're going to love it right away, you're going to end up spending $1,200 to $2,400.
That's actually low,
No,
I would say.
I said $1,200 to $2,400 when it comes to all of the expansions that you're going to want to get your hands on and the next 2 to 3 years worth of support and content coming down the line.
It's a lot.
You don't have to. But the game, if it's right for you...
It'll pull you in.
If it's right for you, you will. That's maybe a factor that's worth thinking.
For sure. And
it's sort of heartbreaking that it has to be, right?
Yeah.
Like it's such a good game. I hate telling people that they'll probably want to spend $1,200 to $2,400 on it, but they will want to.
Yeah, it becomes super easy. You start creating justifications for getting all these things that you might not even need, because really, for a second, let's take a step back and start breaking down how many components do we get? Like, what is making those $400, be that? What is making this box be $400?
Well, in the core box, you get the antelope, the white lion, the phoenix, which is a big, I'll have B-roll of this. You get the butcher, the kingsman, the watcher, the gold smoke knight, which are 2 end game core monsters. So these are all big boss people that you're facing. And then you get your starting 4 survivors. And then you have representative armor kits and gear and full models
for each.
I think it's 50 something total for every piece of armor and gear that you get with it. So you end up with 50 or 60 scaled models to build. That's just the plastic.
And these are highly detailed models. I cannot stress enough how gorgeous these things are.
And then on top of that, you have a hardcover rulebook full to the brim with rich lore and art and well-written rules, even if there's a lot of them to go through. You have a beautiful player board, you have good quality cardboard tokens with custom art on each one, and then a whole pile of cards. Go ahead and pull that over here.
Yeah,
into the
I think
middle.
it's over 2,000 cards or something like that. It's
and
a crazy
this is in
amount.
the core box alone. These are going to be your monster AI decks, your resources, your gear cards, your upgrades. And not only that, but there's a whole pile of little gear cards that slot into your board. I have a binder in the back full of them.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'll have B-roll at this point. So there's a ton.
Yeah, there's a lot here.
You're getting a $400 game.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's really hard to justify. And this is why we tried to do this video, right? We're trying to give people a resource so that you can make a responsible yet correct decision for yourself.
I have never once regretted owning a copy of this game. And I have a copy of this game that I bought a Black Friday about 2 seasons ago at my parents' house, still in cardboard, because I genuinely think this is a game I'll want to look back on when I'm 40 or 50 with my family, with some kids, once they're kind of to age. That's my stance. I'm a big fanboy, like I am. Like, I'm willing to admit that. I did at the very beginning. It doesn't change the fact that there was something for me to fall in love with.
And for me, that I'm not necessarily a fanboy, but I'm still a fan of the game, I can tell you, really, if you're still in this point in the video, and you are still interested, and you are still invested, and you are going like, oh my god, that sounds so cool, this is something that you might want to invest in. This is something that you might actually really, really
You know how
love.
you like heirloom pieces of furniture and stuff like that? This, in some ways, is sort of a heirloom board game.
It becomes an antique for you. It becomes something that you will never let go of because you stuck to this point in the video. Let me stress that more. But for everybody else, if
they're not watching. So.
Exactly.
Hey guys, if you're still watching the video at this point, you probably are some of the diehard Kingdom Death community that tuned in for my Adam's Poots video, tuned in for some of the content that we've been producing here on the channel. It's taken me a long time to get to the point where I felt like I could produce a video on this game because my heart's really in it. And I hope the fact that I really care about the community and the game and the creators comes through. We tried to be as thorough and honest as we could, give everyone that needs one a reason to step out. You know, tried to point out the errors and the things that make this really hard. So that hopefully by the end of this video, we'll have 10 or 20 or a couple hundred new members in our community. And we're excited to have them there. You guys welcomed me when I, found a home in Kingdom Death. And I thank you for that. You guys have led to the creation of this channel in a lot of ways. I had a tweet for a while that was just at Kingdom Death, at Adam Poots. I'm doing all this for you. And it's not entirely wrong. This is where my heart is.
Yeah.
Now, the games behind me are special, and I'm excited about them, and I can't wait to bring a whole diversity to the channel. But just know, while it might take me a whole lot of time to get here, we're working on and thinking through ways to build and improve and bring content to you all, my kind of core community. So, thank you for joining me. Thank you for being a part of this duck army. Referencing the cow army that from Escape from Dulce. But thank you for being a part of the paddle. We're glad you're here. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Like, because you enjoyed this video.
Yeah.
Hopefully, because you watched to this point. Comment, letting us know your thoughts on Kingdom Death as a whole. Did we miss anything when it comes to innovation or barriers to entry? What did we overlook in a game that is this scale? And then lastly, subscribe because we put out new videos every single week. Gameplay, how to plays, full overviews, unboxings, and know that Kingdom Death is on the way. We have some gameplay in the works, some of the best quality and most highly edited stuff possible. It's a whole lot of work. We'll need your support to make it happen. We have new expansions coming out. We want to do unboxings and overviews and how to plays. It's just a matter of getting a foundation here that allows us to do that. So your support, you sharing, you pushing everything is going to set the foundation for the content we want to do in the future. I know that's been a whole little section all to itself. Thank you for listening. I really wanted a second to talk to people that have kind of...
It's almost like a secret message.
It is.
Isn't it?
It's people that have been my people from the beginning. These
people.
I connect with them at Gen Con. Like, they're the ones that are there at 3 a.m., where I was 2 years ago, waiting on those doors to open to run to the front of the line.
But remember, there might be some people that aren't part of that.
And if you're not, I'm so excited for you to join us. Because at this point, you're going to.
Very likely, or you're just incredibly curious, that could be it.
Whatever you do, please remember to do the important thing. Get out and play some games. We'll see you next time. Thank you, guys.